the purity of the body, with purity being one of those interesting, what are they called?
Oh, it's yamas niyamas.
Oh, you're so good. Look at that memory. It's distilling, removing the corrupting forces to what's harming you.
Yeah, no. Purity is good. I mean, in this yogic way, right? In yoga and certainly Ayurveda, the system works so well so long as we don't interfere with it. And we constantly interfere with it and come out of balance.
To interfere with it, to find the balance, to get that homeostasis going again.
Get the gunk out of the way so the system can do the amazing stuff it already does.
Yeah. It's funny that I so much more readily buy into that with movement. I feel like there is this remembering and that this is the way that it's designed to work. But I think that you would have to keep interfering over and over again because the brain readily reprograms in favor of, this is the way you've always done it, so why would I change?
Right.
That there's also this very deep drive inside of us to just do what's easiest. Does it naturally want to return to this native state? I don't know. It's like romanticizing like earlier days sucked for any minority and any woman. There's no pure state that we're returning to as much as we have to opt out and opt in skillfully.
So we're talking about tree pose.
Single leg stance, tree pose is one of the most important fundamental skills you can have.
Yeah. So it was Mythbusters, a great program my kids watched. And there was a guy who would see how long you could balance on a foot. He had some sort of screen that blocked everything other than how long you could balance. And he could guess your age. And he was pretty much spot on because it deteriorates as you age, but it also deteriorates when you don't exercise it. So, the problem is people don't exercise it. You can maintain and develop your balance at any age. I firmly believe that, but you got to work on it.
Yeah, and you just know that's a resource that's flowing away rather quickly, which people do perceive. And then their strategy is to walk more flat-footed and stare at the ground and right into the city when there's a sidewalk that has a lip on it of 2 inches. This sidewalk needs to be fixed. No, You need to adapt to an uneven environment and just assume that every sidewalk is unlevel. And pick up your feet and pick up your knees and
look forward. Do not look at your feet.
Right. Trust us that as you age, you want to be developing the single leg stance, standing on one leg. Tree pose is the perfect version of it. Tree pose is absolutely a pristinely neutral pelvis.
Yeah.
Which is very tricky because as soon as you bring that raised leg out, the pelvis rotates, the hip might drop, you might get a lateral pelvic tilt, anterior pelvic tilt.
Yeah, which is why it's a fun pose to start gathering information by doing on your back. Mm-hmm. If you just come on your back and you extend out, so you're in Tadasana, your feet are flexed, and then I have to get my core engaged, right? So I'm going to knit my ribs in and down. I'm going to draw my low belly pubic bone to navel, zip it up. Then I extend my legs long, and I'm going to find that my pelvis is going to want to rotate again just to get my legs extended long. So I'll stop right before they're fully extended. I'll do a little adjustment to my pelvis, and then I'll re-extend. And it's so active. It's so much work.
To get both legs straight without going into that anterior tilt. You want a neutral arch in the low back, so then you have to double down on your exhales, your abdominal support.
Yes.
Coax that tight iliacus in particular that wants to tilt the pelvis forward.
Yeah. And then you take one leg, draw it up, and rotate the leg externally and come to tree pose. And this is where there's some good information, some honesty that happens right around here.
I wouldn't even cue anyone. I would just say, just bring your leg into tree pose.
Yeah.
And now put your hands on your pelvis and notice how the pelvis has listed over towards the bent knee side.
Yeah. So that's always really good because when you know what you're working with, you can work with it, right?
Well, because the cueing is press your leg out to the side, which everyone's like, oh, and in tree pose, your leg's supposed to be straight out to the side. Like in Warrior 2, we want the leg turned out 90 degrees. But in Warrior 2, we said, angle your pelvis to accommodate that. It's not anatomically fruitful otherwise. But in tree pose, we're saying keep your pelvis square. We're really going for that pristine Tadasana state, except for that one leg. So now that leg can't be as far as it can possibly go because that causes your lumbar spine and your pelvis to rotate. So whole lumbopelvic structure stable. And now that branch of your leg is floating up in the air. It's not dropping its full weight. And
Yeah.
the weight of the leg is something now that your abdominals have to navigate. Your abdominals have to try to roll you towards the straight leg side in order to support how heavy that bent leg can feel.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's always fun. It's fun to use your lower abdominals that way because we all know that we need to have a strong relationship with them. And I remember when I started paying attention to them, I didn't really have any sense of, like, I don't know, am I engaging them? Am I working them? But when you're saying, okay, your hip is going to want to lift and use your lower abdominals to keep it on the ground, that's a nice job. It's specific and you can feel whether or not you have any effect.
Right. And I think that's when you cue how to do that. Put your fingers below your navel. Because you say, like, put your hands on your belly. Everyone's above the navel. So put your hands below your navel and blow out as though you're blowing out candles, a forceful exhale, and really feel those hip points narrow in. And specifically, if the left leg is bent out, you're really narrowing that left hip point towards the right one to try to get that ilium, that half of the pelvis, to come back to neutral and not just fall open.
Then coming to the floor and doing tree pose on the side and lining yourself up with the edge of the mat so that you're in a straight line and trying to activate the inner leg line. I want my standing leg to be connecting with my lifted leg with the same energy that if I bring my hands to prayer and I press them in towards each other. Right? It's an equal and oppositional energy that helps me find that midline that keeps me stable. And Sarah had a really good way of activating the abductors. And that was when you were on your sideline, were you pressing into the outer ankle and lifting up?
Pushing into the outer edge of the foot.
Outer edge of the foot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then see if you can hover that pelvis.
Yeah.
Or at least have the intention of hovering it.
I know, which was super fun because then when you do tree pose inside plank, it's the same thing. And it's really fun. Yeah. And I was having a lot of fun doing tree pose, inside plank, and then grabbing the big toe and stepping forward to a lunge. Because that's a good party trick.
Yeah. And I think side plank is another razor's edge. You only have a little strip of the body that's connected to the earth.
Right.
And every time we kind of up the stakes like that, everything else, all those other stabilizers that are usually dormant and asleep, they all have to
show up. Yeah. Yeah. Very cool. So then we are coming now to, making sure that the hip is stable. It's really interesting in this pose how easily people can dump into a hip and let the hip kick out to the side. And that also will screw up your center of gravity.
Yeah, which is hip abduction or lateral pelvic tilt, if you want to get into those anatomical terms. It used to be very confusing to me. That's hip adduction. When that leg that you're standing on is no longer perpendicular to the floor, the foot has narrowed relative to the hip joint. That's adduction. So that's what that hip's doing when the pelvis kicks out to the side.
Yeah.
And those inner muscles are overwhelming the stabilizers of the outer hip.
Yeah. So you got to hug in that outer hip and look at yourself in the mirror. See what your pelvis is doing. Try to keep the pelvis level. I like to start with my hands on my pelvis and just see what's going on because I want to hike up my hip because maybe I want to get my leg up higher. And that's going to cause challenges to my balance too. So just see what you got and then make a choice, right?
Right. Let that pelvis go out to the side, compare and contrast,
Yeah.
and then firm the gluteals, especially on the side of the hip and on the back of the hip. Squeeze the pelvis over using those gluteal muscles and see oh, I can center my pelvis a little bit more.
Yeah.
And my leg is closer to perpendicular to the floor. The wider your pelvis is, the wider your hips are, the more challenging this will be.
Yeah. And I always think of the glutes, right? They're core, right? Core includes the back body. And so it's fun to be able to use these lower core muscles, front and back, to try to get your pelvis in the placement you want.
The yoga principle that you'll hear is outer hips to inner hips. So it's taking those outer hips and plugging them in. Sometimes it's called corn cobbing the hips.
Yeah.
As though you have those corn cob holders that you stick into the sides of the corn cob to eat
Yeah.
that. Right. That's the feeling of plugging that outer hip in, of compacting, narrowing and having a sense of downward rooting and upward lifting, and it's not spreading out to the sides.
Yeah. And it's so cool too, because when you're talking about this, hugging in, right, versus spreading out. And when you hug in, it also just does the exact next thing, which is it causes your core to engage. And naturally, you're going to want to elevate the ribs up a little bit. You're going to want to keep the ribs from dropping down onto the pelvis, right? Instead of that shrinking. And this is where you keep growing your spine, right? So you get the base of it really stabilized. Then the ribs can float up a little bit. The arms can reach up. Hopefully you're not lifting with your neck, right? Everything grows taller. And oh my God, it feels good.
Does. And then the arms become that asset to balance and lengthening instead of, oh, now the pose is too hard because I'm so gooey. Once you lock in and it stops feeling so incredibly gooey and it feels locked in and solid, it's like, oh, wow, like my core is light and agile and I can reach and triangle pose, and all these other poses become lighter when those outer hips firm in.
Yeah.
And we should make a slight distinction here, because the abductors take the leg away and then the adductors, the inner thighs, bring the legs together, but we're talking about everything coming together. And it's because when that foot widens, and you can try this standing on one leg and just widen the other leg out to the side, that outer upper hip on the side of the pelvis, that's moving in, and the greater trochanter moves in towards the midline of the body as the foot goes out to the side. That's hip abduction. And those are the muscles, and that is the directional effect, that even though you're not moving your feet, those outer halves of the pelvis squeeze in, and then you can get some of that inner thigh action Jane was talking about, with that sole of the foot getting as much surface area contact with that inner thigh.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it's like Star Wars, like that trash compactor scene. I think it's the second Star Wars, Princess Leia, Han Solo.
Okay.
And they're in the trash compactor part of the building. Do you remember? Movie reference. I
Nope.
know the name of this movie.
I haven't watched this movie.
Don't even tell me you haven't seen Star Wars.
No, I mean, I don't think so.
What?
If I don't remember it.
It's
but
so Joseph Campbell like.
I
and,
know.
like, it's like-
I have
I mean, it's
spiritual
not-
teachers who reference it, and they reference The Hobbit, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm a bad yogi. I need to get on these things. But no, I haven't.
Anyway, so like the walls of the compactor, the trash compactor scene, spoiler alert,
Yeah.
the walls are closing in to compact. And that's what's happening in that outer hip, is squeezing in, and you sort of fuse the hips. You go from this feeling of having these wide hips to having very narrow, compact hips. And although we don't stay there, that's create way too much tension. I can go there to stand on one leg, and then I can release into a more moderate activity of those hip abductors and feel more stable now walking and going through life. And like suddenly my hips feel stable. I feel amazing.
Right. Well, if our hips were that stable, it would be really hard to bear children. There's a reason that serves us. That it's a nice structure.
And just like we would take someone with very narrow hips who can't expand, and we'd be like, do these yoga poses, spread your legs far apart, like see if you can get this range. Like we're trying to coax that student into loosening up. Like, can you do cat cow? Can you circle your hips and all these gooey moves that those people who have more of that fused structure holding all the time, they need to have this experience of gooiness and come to a place of moderation.
But we're just looking at getting balance and finding the midline and getting really secure to that. And so that helps a lot. And the thing I love about that too is when you get the pelvis cinched in and ready to go, you can continue to grow in both directions. So you can continue to be like, I'm going to root my feet down. I'm going to lift up the ribs. I'm going to get more buoyant from the ribs up. So can I lengthen my waist here? Can I like get longer in the waist? And that feels really nice. Yeah.
It's awesome. And those yogis, they're so good.
I know.
They put that heel way up high, close to the perineum, and often up into the perineum for poses, but right on that lesser trochanter, just a little notch. So if you push your heel into that lesser trochanter, and I would say draw down and then lengthen up in the opposite direction, it's really a profound Uddiyana bandha, these deeper sensations we want students to start to access.
There's two bumps on the femur bone One is the greater trochanter, and the other is the lesser trochanter. And bumps help attach all these muscles and tendons, almost like the thing on a guitar where the string wraps around the tuning thing.
The relevance is that you have two deep psoas muscles. They're very deep stabilizers of the body. They contribute to movement, certainly. Always lurking in the background as a contributor to a lot of issues.
Yeah, the psoas connects the lower body to the upper body. It connects the front to the back. It's pretty amazing. And it weaves through the pelvis.
Yeah, and then it shares a tendinous sheath with the diaphragm, so it's really involved with the breath. So this muscle attaches to the inner thigh.
The lesser trochanter.
The lesser trochanter in your upper inner thigh. If students can't access that lesser trochanter, I've placed a block at its narrowest, longest width in between the thighs. Again, supine is helpful, but then take it to standing, squeeze that block, hug it in. And again, send that block downwards as you stretch up.
Mm-hmm. And getting a stretch in the psoas is really helpful because when we sit, it just gets short. It's the fight, flight, and freeze muscle. So whenever we're stressed out, most of the time, it's in a contractive state. And you can even moderate your nervous system by getting that tissue to stretch and relax and move away from sympathetic to parasympathetic. So it's really a lovely tissue to be able to extend.
Yeah, some of the new thinking is that the psoas complex it's an organ. It's
not
just a muscle.
I've heard the organ thing because the tissue is so different. I believe that there is a deeper understanding about how we hold things in our tissue.
Yeah, and there is something about this hip opening in yoga, right? Releasing tension in this area is associated with an emotional release.
Yeah. When we get to the holidays, I always talk about Stooge and the three spirits of Christmas. Christmas past is the hips because that's where we hold all the trauma. Everything that has been behind us is in the hips. And then the Christmas to come is the shoulders and the neck because that's where we hold all our anxiety and fear. And then Christmas present is the core. Because if you're grounded in the present, you got a sensation in the core that feels aligned.
When you're trying to train the standing leg, because tree pose is all about the standing leg. The branch leg, there's something to that, but that's where you're building, advancing. But first, you're nailing the standing leg. So touching the wall with your elbow, touching the wall with a fingertip, trying not to do a full palming thing, but trying to challenge the balance enough to stimulate some of these mechanoreceptors in the tissue to help you find the balance, but then having enough steadiness, a little comfort of the elbow to a wall or the fingertip, then you can sustain the pose without being so frustrated of constantly coming out over and over again.
Yeah. When you're first starting tree pose, it feels like it's all about the lifted leg.
Right.
And then that's where you see people kind of collapse into it, where they shorten their body, and that's what happens. That's interesting.
It's always about the foundation leg. This is another really deep principle that's come through, especially Iyengar yoga, is like pay attention to the foundation.
Yeah.
And everything else is, I kind of call it decorative.
Yeah. If you get the foundation, this beautiful effort and engagement, everything else is lighter.
Mm-hmm. One of the ways that you could maybe feel this is if you do tree pose with the bent knee touching the wall.
Yeah.
So then you have that light security blanket of it touching the wall. And then you can take that wall hand to the wall, isometrically pull down with your hand on the wall. And that connects that opposite shoulder to this foundation leg hip.
Yeah.
Because they have that functional connection between the opposite shoulder and that hip, and triggering that gluteal to engage through that hand movement is another way to sustain your balance longer in this pose and then work the felt experience of stabilizing that standing hip.
Yeah, and I like that. And if your foot is high enough above your knee, I like to take the knee that's on the wall and reach it down the wall. I also sometimes do this pose on blocks, and that's a nice little modification. And thinking about the foot, I'll take 2 blocks. So the long edge of the block is parallel to the short edge of the mat, and it's on the lowest height. And I'll leave a gap for the arch of the foot to go over. So the ball mount of the foot is on one block and the heel's on the other. And somehow having that gap just creates this lift. If you have a cork block, it's totally different than if you have one of those squishy blocks, which I'm not as big a fan of doing them on. But all the little movement that you get in your ankle is so good for ankle strength and stability and just learning how to keep coming to center, because this pose, like so many other poses, is simply moving in and out of center, moving in and out of balance, right? And trying to make that range smaller and smaller, but letting those small stabilizing muscles like really come in and get a good exercise. They get a good workout.
Yeah, this pose is never motionless.
No.
It is the way you train your balance is by allowing yourself to lose the balance and then trying to regain it instead of trying for immobility and then giving up as soon as you get the slightest movement, which is how I think most students approach it.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I can't do it. And they come, no.
Yeah.
Wobble a little.
Yeah. I try to do that too. Coming in and out of the pose is the pose. And notice when you come out of the pose, can you make that part of the pose? Take a breath. And on the exhale, bring the foot back up. Maybe bring it down. Maybe play with coming in and out, right? Instead of what happens often is you lose your balance, you put your foot down, and you want to make sure to get the foot back up before anyone notices. It seems like it has that energy. So there's no like regrouping or grounding, and then that doesn't work. So you keep doing that, and then you just say, screw it. And then you get a different lesson, which is how do you deal with life when things don't go your way and you keep trying to
Yeah, this is a real mind game, this pose, and the relationship that people have with it of overachieving to the max. And you're so quickly frustrated with it.
Yeah.
And I think standing on the block, I feel everyone balances a little better because the brain takes it so incredibly seriously. It's like that study they did when they had a stranger ask somebody out in an ordinary room like this,
right,
or ask them out while they're on a bridge that's like waving side to side. The person who was being asked out on the bridge much more readily said yes.
Oh, yeah.
Because it just heightens everything. It just heightens your excitement and your adrenaline. Everything's going. I don't know if that's the same thing as what's happening in the foot, but your body takes it extremely seriously. You're still on a flat, relatively stable surface, but the brain takes it so much more seriously. And if your feet are small enough that you can stand with both feet on the block, and then really get that sense of, oh my gosh, my hips are so wide. Can I compact the pelvis in? And then just bend one knee with the foot out behind you. You don't even have to bring the hip into flexion.
Right.
Let's not get into stimulating those hip flexors and get into forward tilt and everything. Let's just see if we can bend the knee one at a time. And even if they're failing on the block, when they step off of the block,
right,
they're like, oh, I feel better. Now I can feel what you're, I'm walking around the room. Oh, I can feel my hip extensors kicking.
Right.
I can feel my glutes working.
Yeah.
You don't have to be successful much in a single leg stance to get benefit from trying it.
Yeah. And you were talking about how we increase our balance by coming in and out of it.
Dr. Fishman's method for osteoporosis, that loss of bone density as we age, he's got some series of yoga poses that are proven to build bone.
Right.
And his first pose in the first series is tree pose.
Yeah.
So he's starting with a balanced pose. You're not warmed up.
Nope.
You haven't done anything else.
You're bearing all your weight on one leg.
Bear all your weight on one leg. And I've had mixed feelings about the sequencing, but I've come to realize I really like that as the first pose.
Yeah.
And like, let's right away trigger the muscles of
wake everything
standing
up
on one leg.
Yeah.
And then go to do these poses where now we're straddling yourself out wider, you know, and maybe there's a chance that some of the right muscles, fingers crossed, woke up.
Yeah. Yeah. And yoga is really good like that. It's weight bearing.
It's weight bearing, and especially for people who haven't done it as long as we have, it's novel and non-functional and weird and strange and twisting, leaning way over sideways and reaching way out, taking you far away from the midline as well, in all sorts of strange relationships to gravity that I think are very challenging for balance, orientation.
Yep.
It's getting the head to turn.
And so if tree pose is a pose that is really available to you, then challenge yourself, whether or not that's closing your eyes or taking a twist or allowing your arms to come overhead so narrow that they don't add any more balance help.
Right.
Yeah. So that's a fun thing about this too. You can even try to come up on your toes. There's so many ways to bring it to a place where you fall out of it.
Yeah, and then it carries over to all your other single leg stance poses, all the ekapadas, right?
Yeah.
So the one-legged downward dog and the one-legged uttanasana, the standing splits, and then it's all about the foundation leg
Yeah.
and getting that to be stable and not glide anteriorly, not medially rotates. You're not seeing that knee twist. You're not seeing that foot turn in, and disciplining those deep lateral rotators to hold the hips stable in the socket as the pelvis rotates around a stable base, which it's supposed to. And so many of those more advanced sequences in a vinyasa classes, you're on that front leg, you're in a side angle pose, and you go to half moon, and then you go to warrior three, then you go to a standing split, and you're just rotating on what you hope is a stable femur. But
Right.
often for those flexible people, that femur is twisting, grinding inwards, and you start to really feel it in your hip crease.
Okay, that makes sense.
So then holding that stable, training that in one-legged downward dog. Then if you can really secure that hip and watch that leg with your eyes as you then slowly stack the hips. And if you're seeing that leg twist in, nope, you got to come back, regroup.
Yeah. And the other thing happens when I'm doing that is I can feel that I dump onto the standing leg. You know, it's like I have to use my lower core to hoist up the pelvis away from the earth because the pelvis just wants to hang down.
Yeah, pelvis really loves to collapse into that hip flexion.
Yeah.
And that's where you need those breaks that we talked about in Uttanasana.
Yeah.
Your gluteals, your hamstrings, right? Anything pulling down on the posterior pelvis to take you out of that crash forward, that lifting up, that hollowing of the belly, that making of space.
Yeah.
Especially if you do the standing splits.
Tree pose is a great pose. And yeah, if you can't do tree pose, then just start standing with your legs one in front of the other. And if that's too much, take them a little bit wider. Just start where you are and keep challenging yourself because this is something that's going to serve you so well for the rest of your life. But if you fall out of it and you're having struggles in your marriage, just know our sample size of 2 has shown there's 100% correlation.
Don't ask for whom the bell tolls.
Yeah, okay, bye.